The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Democratic race for State School Superintendent.
Good afternoon. I'm Ricky Bevington, a senior anchor and correspondent, as well as the local host of All Things Considered on Georgia Public Broadcasting Radio. Welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of GPB in Atlanta. This is the debate among Democratic candidates for State School Superintendent. And let's meet them. They are in alphabetical order. Sid Chapman is the past president of the Georgia Association of Educators. Sam Mosteller is a pastor and a retired service member. And Otha Thornton is the principal consultant at Thornton Consulting Group. And now let's meet our panelist. Ashley Garrett is a weekend anchor with WRBL TV in Columbus, Georgia. Stephanie Stokes is a reporter for WABE 90.1 FM. And Ty Tagami is an education reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And now we will get started. For rules on today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. To start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists. And Ty Tagami, you get the first question.
Mr. Thornton, you say on your website that our education system is failing our students, our families, the economy. What would you do to fix that?
Okay, sir, thank you for your question. Thank you for having me here today. Sir, families are a very important part of our education system. The way I plan on fixing that is through wraparound services. You have to meet the needs of the child in school systems in order to help them prosper. I have extensive experience in workforce development also, and I've worked with school systems around the country in getting the communities involved and families involved to help kids have opportunities to prosper within the school systems.
And Ashley Garrett, you may ask Sam Mosteller a question.
Mr. Mosteller, part of your platform includes having an all-hands-on-deck approach when it comes to helping our students succeed. Part of your plan includes tailoring students' educational trajectory to their future. Can you please provide specifics?
Well, what we've done so far, Ms. Garrett, is that we've succeeded in teaching a 19th century model for education. We're going to have to create a 21st century model that matches the demographic, that matches the job requirements, the 21st century job requirements, and the dynamics of the family has all changed. And the school system has not changed well enough or fast enough, and we're going to have to bring those changes, and I think I'm the guy to do that, simply because in the military I was force structure. We learned how to do force structure. We learned how to do manpower. We learned how to do all mission analysis, and that's what we'll bring to it, a mission analysis component.
Thank you for your answers. And Stephanie Stokes, please ask a question to Sid Chapman.
Mr. Chapman, you called for a state superintendent who will push back against the governor. I'm wondering, how do you view the relationship between the state school superintendent and the governor, and how do you plan to work with whoever wins the governor's seat next year?
Thank you for that question, and thank you all for having me here today. Technically, I'm still the president of the Georgia Association of Educators until July 5th, but that's beside the point. But I will work with the governor, whoever is elected. I just have my plan. I think that it's constitutional office and that the people elect the state school superintendent and supposed to take care of the welfare and the executing of the budget and so forth for the school system K through 12. And so I don't really, you mean with the current governor, I've had pushbacks with him.
Now you called for a more aggressive state school superintendent. So I'm curious if you would, how you would collaborate with the governor and if you would take a stand against the governor on occasions.
Of course, I would collaborate with the governor because, they're the elected official in that spot and they have a lot of power. And so we would want to collaborate and make sure that we're doing the best for the public schools in Georgia and for the children and the educators in Georgia.
And thank you for correcting your title. That concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to an opponent of their choice. And here's how it works. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, Sam Mosteller, you may ask the first question.
I would like to direct my first question to Mr. Otha Thornton. He's my frat brother, so we're cordial, but bottom line is we're trying to win the superintendent job. My question is, as the head of the National PTA, why is it that we have such a low parental involvement in Georgia schools?
Well, we actually, with National PTA and Georgia PTA, we actually have increased parental involvement, and the Georgia Department of Education has adopted our family engagement model, which the current superintendent is pushing to get parents involved. And it's a process and it's a commitment from parents and community leaders to make that happen.
And a 30-second rebuttal?
I would still say that in all the talks and all the focus groups we've had across about 50 counties, it is parental involvement from the administrators and teachers that is lacking in one aspect. Positive parental involvement. Some of the parents come in and do other things negatively, but parental involvement is going to be one of the major components that we're going to have to be successful at. And right now we're not successful at it in Georgia. That's one of many things we're not successful at in the education system.
And so Chapman, you may now ask your question.
My question is to Mr. Mosteller. In your platform that you said that you would like to see changes in school nutrition, but at the same time you want to do away with federal, state, and local mandates. How do you rectify those?
Well, all federal and state mandates don't have to do with lunchroom, but the lunch portion, particularly free lunch, is important. And what we're talking about there is all hands on deck, meaning that we need to improve the lunches. Children complain that it's slop, throw in the trash can. We're going to have to find something that tastes good for the children, yet be nutritious. And that can be done, and I think it's already been done. We just need to do a better job getting it to the children.
30-second rebuttal.
I would agree that there needs to be something done with the lunches and make sure that all of our children are fed adequately at lunchtime. And I was just interested to see his response, and I'm satisfied with it.
Thank you. Otha Thornton, you now have a final question.
Thank you. Ma'am, as you mentioned, I was a national PTA president, 50 states and a territory, so I've been able to see a lot of great systems around the country. My question is to Dr. Chapman. In 2016, we fought against the Opportunity of School District Amendment 1 because it would take away local control from our local school districts and continue to siphon money out of public schools to private industry. Dr. Chapman said in January 2017 that the House Bill 338 was OSD light.
Get to the question, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My question is, do you regret your vote in supporting House Bill 338 because it's the same thing as OSD?
Well, first of all, thank you for your question. I never voted in favor, nor did GAE vote in favor of 338. We did not take a position of support or against it. We did say, sarcastically, it was OSD light, but it began as a voucher bill, and it had for-profit charters in it. It had a shorter period of time for turnaround. We worked on it, didn't have anything about community schools in it. So we were happy that we were able to get those things added to it and some of it taken out because there's no for-profit charter schools that are allowed in that bill. So, no, I didn't support it. It was kind of neutral the way it came out.
Okay, and Mr. Thornton, you have a 30-second rebuttal.
Well, as a state school superintendent, leadership is required. And when it's time to stand up, you can't take a neutral position. If you were against it in the beginning, it's very important that you continue to stand. Basically, the governor got what he wanted and just changed the names. We have a chief turnaround officer now instead of a OSD superintendent, and they still have the same power by law to take over schools, which can happen during our superintendency. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a request from the control room. Somebody's telephone is on. If everybody could please not just go on silent or vibrate, but please go on airplane mode, and that goes for the candidates as well. I just checked my phone. So now that we're all on the same page, so that we don't get interrupted and our audience can enjoy what our candidates are saying. For those of us just joining us, this is the debate between the Democratic candidates for state school superintendent. And we will now go back to our panel to ask questions to the candidate of his or her choice. This until we run out of time. And as a point of moderator privilege, I may also ask a question of the candidates, and I will determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. And Ty Tagami, you get the first question in this round.
Mr. Mosteller, you said earlier that you want to bring our schools into the 21st century. Our current leaders say they're doing that with these, they call them flexibility contracts with all the school districts. It basically waives a lot of red tape and gives them some freedom from the rules. And I'm wondering if you think that that is working. Is that bringing us into the 21st century?
I don't think it's going to bring us into the 21st century. It's working in some places, other places it's not working well. You're going to need centralized planning, decentralized execution. And what I've said is all hands on deck. That means if you've got 5 doctorates or you dropped out of school, that means that you can do something to help us to bring the schools back. It's a battle. We're having a battle for our children's mind. We're having a battle for public schools. We're having to battle for families. Some of the problems that are happening in the classroom are not endemic to the classroom, but come from issues at the home, issues in the community, and so on. So that we've got a lot of things to do, and corporate is going to have to help. Government is going to have to help, and parents are going to have to help.
Thank you. Ashley Garrett, you have the next question.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chapman, on your campaign site, there's a statement that reads, quote, "Our children deserve a quality education delivered by quality educators who receive quality pay in every school district." Can you explain what exactly is quality pay for teachers, and if elected, how soon would teachers be able to see it?
Well, thank you for that question, because that is very much on the minds of every educator. We have many educators that live below the poverty line in Georgia. Of course, our average teacher pay is better than many states across the South. But you look at Oklahoma, the average was $35,000. You look what's happened in West Virginia and Kentucky and Arizona. So teachers are stepping up and saying they need better pay, and it's very difficult to recruit someone with higher degrees and that want to come into the profession when they can go and work somewhere else for 3 times the pay. So usually people that teach do it because they have a passion for it. That's why I do it. And so we've got to have full funding for our school system. I'm glad to see that the governor put in an extra $167 million this year. And that was great. So we don't know where all that's going and how it will be used, but we certainly want to recruit and retain the best educators, especially classroom teachers.
Thank you. Stephanie Stokes, next question.
Mr. Thornton, the Georgia State Legislature recently formed a new study committee to look at school safety. This follows the shooting in Parkland, Florida. What improvements would you like to see?
Well, as I mentioned earlier in my statements, I think wraparound services, and when you address issues early, with psychological services to ensure that kids are successful in school, you help eliminate that. I am totally against, in some counties that are arming teachers. I am totally against that. We send teachers to school to educate, and as we say, you arm teachers with supplies and resources to do a great job in making sure our kids get a great education.
Thank you. We would like to give each of the candidates an opportunity to ask this question. Stephanie, why don't you repeat the question, and we'll allow the other two to answer.
Following the mass shooting, following the high school shooting in Parkland, Florida, what improvements would you like to see to school safety?
Start with me.
We'll start with Mr. Chapman and then
thank
Mr.
you very
Mosteller.
much. Thank you for that question, and it's such a timely question. And the idea of arming teachers with lethal weapons is absolutely absurd. I don't know of any educator. I have the pulse of educators across this country, and I've not heard anyone say that they would like to have a gun. I know, as having been a classroom teacher for many years, if kids could find my test, they could find a gun if you got it hidden in the classroom, and it's a recipe for disaster. Now, there are ways that we can make the schools safer. Of course, more funding, we can have better security, but we don't want it to be like a prison. We've got to find innovative ways to make the schools safer, and the children can feel comfortable when they come in. And so it's a job ahead of us. It's the world we live in, but we certainly don't want to put guns in the hands of educators.
Mr. Mosteller, 60 seconds to answer.
Thank you for the question. In my former life, I was a counterterrorism expert all over the world, Germany, all over America. And we did some of the 9/11 investigation at the Pentagon. I had some agents doing that. But we're going to have to attack this from scientific methodology. Number one, we're going to have to look at the profile for mass shooters. And it's pretty much the same profile for every mass shooter that we've had at the schools. Secondly, a lot of it come out of being bullied and rejected. We're going to have to deal with what social media bullying and bullying on site. Those are the issues, and wraparound service is going to help. But we need psychologists available to our students and to our school system. We need nurses available. They used to be there when I was there, and we had them available, but they're no longer available now because of money or whatever. But we're going to have to put that back in place in order to prevent mass shootings, and then we're going to have to do something with better training for resource officers.
Do you, Mr. Mosteller, think that it's right to arm teachers?
No, it's foolish. Teachers already have more than enough to do in the classroom. From our focus groups, we find out that the teacher's already the social worker, halfway the parent, the teacher, and sometimes the principal. And they have to do all of this in the classroom. The recipe is for disaster. If you put guns around children, teenagers, they're going to get curious, try to find it, and next thing you know, they'll either shoot themselves, shoot the teacher, or some accident will happen. And I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Okay.
I think I'll be proven out as we go forward.
Thank you. And the other two candidates, would you like to answer the same question?
Repeat the question.
Is it right to arm teachers?
No, it's not.
Okay.
There's a difference between educating a child and taking another human's life. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel of the United States Army. I was an infantry officer. And again, we should ensure, again, we provide services for children and also ensure that we have great school resource officers and support them in order to make a difference and work with the culture and the climate in the schools. So I'm absolutely against arming teachers.
Okay. And you answered the question.
Again,
okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure everybody got a chance to answer yes or no. Tai Tagami, next question.
Mr. Chapman, you just mentioned more school funding, and I'm wondering, we spent a full year looking at our 30-year-old school funding formula. Wondering what we were unsuccessful changing it. How would you change it?
Well, first of all, have a real conversation with the legislators, bring it forward, see if they've got in committee something to talk about. They've talked around it for a number of years, so we would like to see a formula that is equitable across the state. We have so many school systems that average student may have, $7,000 or $8,000 per student. Then we have others that have $5,000 or less down in more impoverished areas. In some of these areas that are called impoverished schools, they're not necessarily impoverished. So the formula is very difficult to translate right now or interpret. And so I would like to be able to sit down with the governor and legislators and come up with a fair and equitable way of funding schools.
Thank you. Ashley Garrett, next question.
Thank you. Mr. Thornton, on your campaign site, you have a list of issues noted. You mentioned there's a need to empower Georgia families and educators when it comes to the success of our students. Please explain for our Georgia residents in the Chattahoochee Valley, including Columbus, how you plan to empower our families and educators in an effort to ensure student success.
Well, I'll answer that. I'll start off with national level quickly and work down. As the National PTA president, I work directly with the White House, Congress, and Department of Education in writing in the new ESSA, parental involvement and engagement. And what we're seeing from that, the family resource centers, state family engagement centers, was part of the legislation that we got inserted into the law. It's been funded about $10 million. I'm not sure where Georgia is on receiving funding for that. But again, as a state school superintendent, that's one of the things we need to do. In your particular area, we need to leverage our military bases in the area. I worked up in Maryland where we were able to get the military bases and surrounding and supporting businesses to support the schools and community. And it allowed the parents to get involved in the process, help them with jobs, resources. So that's one of the ways I would plan on empowering our families, by getting them involved in the process.
Thank you. Tai Tagami, next question.
Mr. Thornton, this past legislative session, our lawmakers voted to give state charter schools more money and to increase tax credit scholarships for private schools. Do you think that's the right approach to improving outcomes?
No, it's not, because you have 5 districts in Georgia that still get less funding than the entire ones. And I applaud Lindsey Tippin for stepping down, because he fought with them because they didn't do the right thing. I'm 100% public schools, and when you're taking money away from public schools, that's just unacceptable. And you mentioned pertaining to funding. We have 1985, the funding formula. So did that take into account technology? We're talking about, STEM and STEAM, but are we properly funding them? No, we're not. So I think we need to really have a current formula for it, and we do not need to fund private schools.
Thank you for your answers, gentlemen. I'd like to apologize to Stephanie Stokes, who I accidentally skipped. She was the next in order, but thank you, Ty, for your question. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time, Stephanie, but I wanted to acknowledge that that was a mistake, and I apologize. So that is all the time that we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Otha Thornton, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I'm from rural Georgia, and education is everyone's responsibility. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel, former national PTA president, and I've done a lot of great things for our nation and also for our state. What we need in the next superintendent, we need a strong leader. You need a chief executive administrator, and I've proven that with my service in the White House under 2 administrations. I've proven that through being a national PTA and just an advocate around the nation. We need a great chief advocate. That chief advocate needs to know what the facts and issues are and pull everyone together, listen to them, listen to teachers, listen to parents, listen to support staff to make sure, and other stakeholders, so we can make sure their voice is heard in the process. And last, we need a chief resource officer. We need to support the school districts in doing their job. That's our job. So remember, vote Otha Thornton on May 22nd for your next school superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you. Sid Chapman, closing statement.
Thank you so much for having this forum, and I appreciate being here today, and I appreciate my opponents and their work. And I've been a teacher for almost 29 years and advocate. You combine those. I was in the classroom, a certified teacher. I've been an advocate as president in Clayton County during a crisis period for 12 years. I was also vice president of GAE, now current president of GAE. By that, and I represent the Southeast at the National Education Association. I'm elected by my peers. I am a leader. I do understand education. I have the pulse. I've worked on ESSA myself. I'm endorsed by people like Roy Barnes, Jason Carter, Vincent Ford, others from all across the state, leaders in the House and in the Senate, because they know I'm a leader. I've been at the Capitol, Georgia Capitol, for over 20 years, lobbying and working for better education. I've talked to many of you in your on phones and in your studios. So I'm the leader. I'm the person to be the state school superintendent of Georgia. Go for Sid for super.
Thank you. And Sam Mosteller, final closing statement.
Thank you all for having me and giving us this time to speak to the Georgia population and the voting population. I grew up in rural Georgia. I grew up in Somerville, Georgia. And I guess I'm the only African-American hillbilly that you are going to meet, because most of us stay there and don't move from that area. I went to public school is what made the whole of America great. It's public school. It's not any of these other formulas. There's no magic trick to it. It's just hard work. A lot of the teachers, most of the teachers know and have learned that it is an avocation and not an occupation. They have to make it a way of life. I'm the leader. I've set a leadership example. I commanded 3 companies, been an S3 in a battalion. I've lived overseas for 7 years. I'm bringing an international perspective and a statewide perspective to this. And we'll bring a succinct and specific methodology for moving forward and improving the schools. That includes parents, community, and corporations.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your closing statements, gentlemen. And that concludes the debate. We would like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held Tuesday, May 22nd. Early voting is already underway. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. And for more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all of the debates they'll host this primary election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Ricky Bevington. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to the Atlanta Press Club for having the Loudermilk Young debate series. Bye-bye.